Forrest, could you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, my name is Forrest. I'm a security researcher here at Cybereason. Mostly have a focus on malware, reverse engineering, low-level programming, and those types of topics.
So you recently created a tool called Siofra. Um, why don't you tell me what this tool does?
So this is a tool that can identify and exploit DLL hijacking vulnerabilities. So it can simulate basically the Windows loader mechanism to find vulnerable modules that get loaded into Windows programs or third-party applications on Windows. And it can also do something called PE infection, which means that it can create these sort of modified DLLs that have custom payloads for a researcher or a pen tester or whoever would be using the tool.
Is this a very common vulnerability? What's the level of seriousness?
So it's actually something that's been around for a really long time. It's not exactly a new topic. There weren't too many good scanners out there for it, though, that I was able to find when I started doing the research, and there weren't very many good resources on it either. So it was a topic that there's lots of sort of surface level information, but there wasn't very many good in-depth resources on it. So it's pretty old, it's well known, but I don't think that the scope of the issue was known sort of in a modern context, because the scanner that I wrote found, it was in a single application that I scanned that I didn't find quite a few vulnerabilities in. So in terms of how it's actually used, in the wild, so to speak, it's used mostly by more advanced malware families and by APT, by governments and things like that, as sort of a stealthy persistence mechanism, almost sort of like a rootkit.
This is something that's existed for a long time, and you feel like maybe there's not enough attention to it nowadays because it's been around for a long while?
I mean, maybe to a small extent, but I think also it's, it reminds me of sort of the situation with Mimikatz, for example, which is a tool that was written, a little while back, which basically made this topic of extracting credentials out of Windows systems, particularly like domain controllers, sort of accessible and a lot easier. Whereas it used to be something that's it's been well known since the start of Windows basically, but it wasn't particularly accessible until that tool was written. Now it's a tool that's commonly used in every single red teaming or every single pen testing event that happens. Security researchers know about the tool, and it's become such an issue that it's detected by most antivirus, and Windows has actually fixed the issue in the most recent Windows 10 Windows Server 2016 Enterprise Edition.
Okay. So who do you envision using this tool?
I mean, it's a tool mostly intended for security researchers, but I think it's the kind of tool that you would use during a pen test or something like that, or a red teaming attack. So it's something that you would use while testing, a customer network. Once you get in, because again, this isn't the kind of vulnerability that allows you to break into things. It's the kind of vulnerability that once you're in, it allows you to stick to the systems that you compromise. So it's sort of like a stealthy persistence mechanism.
So it's not the first step, but it might be the second or third step.
Exactly. So it would never be the first step in an attack, but once you actually make that first step and get in, or that second step and get in, this is the kind of thing that you'd want to use to persist. It's pretty tricky to find it once it's there. In fact, one of the reasons I wrote the tool is I really didn't have any good way of finding these types of things in customer environments. There just wasn't any way that you could consistently find them. So if you were trying to look for this type of persistence, there was no good way to do it. There was no good way to find out, for a given application, what are all the vulnerable modules for this application, in different versions and things like that. And there was no way to actually test to see if those worked. So it's something that can tell you what the vulnerable modules are in an application, so you know what things to look for.
So you wrote this for something that you found there was a need for. What brought this to your attention? Like, what brought DLL hijacking? Was there something specific?
Yeah, there was an incident that Asaf and I worked on back earlier this year, this Cobalt Kitty attack, and the attackers were using this exact method basically. But it was it was surprising to me how widespread it was. The types of software that was vulnerable, again, like major software vendors, security vendors, things like that. And I just didn't have a consistent way to go and find those vulnerabilities. I was sort of curious how big of a problem it was. And I wanted to write something that could find all of them. Just at once. Just tell me what all of them are, basically.
That's how we do.
Yeah.
While working on this, what was the most fun moment that you had?
Probably when I finally actually saw it work and I did that full first system scan on my Windows 10, and I thought that it was a bug at first, how much stuff I was getting back. I thought I made like a programming error or something.
Oh
There
no.
was so many vulnerable programs and so many vulnerable modules, I thought it must be a bug. But when I actually went to test them, I was really surprised to see that actually almost every single application on my entire Windows 10 system was vulnerable. And Windows 10, the Windows Defender application was vulnerable, and Internet Explorer and WMI and just everything
That
that I
is
was running.
that is awesome. And kind of scary, but mostly awesome. All right, cool, man. Thank you so much, Forrest, for the tool and for this little chat.
Yeah, thank you.